Hello. Alright. We're back for another blog. Alright. Um Interesting. Okay. So instead of reading another chapter, we're gonna begin an entirely new book. And it's a book I plan on finishing. Yes. It is also something that's required. And since school is starting up again, it's actually starting tomorrow. I suppose I'd better get going on something that is actually due, rather than something that was due and is long overdue and barely matters anymore. Don't worry, I will still finish, Quantum, um, when I have time. But starting from now, we'll focus on a different book, and it's assigned by the same professor who assigned us Quantum. It is. I'm not going to tell you the teacher's name. I'm going to tell you the book's name. It is the Emperor. It's me. It's me. Um, um, how did I have this again? It was like this, right? Okay. Oh, brother, I've just ruined my setup. Okay. Yes, so this is the book. You see, this is my hand for scale, right? And look at this. It is a beefy boy. It is pretty much the same thickness as Quantum. That is to say, very thick. But, quite large. It is, I think, about 25% larger than Quantum in terms of just the area, the sheer area. And as you can read, it is a biography on cancer. I don't know why I chose this book. I think just the Emperor of all maladies sounded apt. So let's go forth and read this. And I'm still debating on whether I want to, actually do this, because, cancer is a pretty gruesome thing. It kind of borders on body horror for me. Like literally any sort of major, it's like, it literally is body horror, I think, just on a much more subtle scale and much deadlier and more real. And I think that makes it more scary for me, at least. And I don't want nightmares about me getting cancerous lumps all over my body, so we'll see if there's any effect on me reading this. And if there is a big enough effect, we might stop. Just saying. Anyways, let's get going. I'm gonna look at how big the chapters are first, just to gauge how long we'll spend per. Oh my god. Part 1 is itself almost 100 pages. I fucking hope there are chapters within each one. It will be a gruesome. Okay, yeah. There are little sections within. Yeah, okay, that makes perfect sense. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Alright. Yep, there are sections, so we will not go through the full 100 pages of part 1. We'll probably go for at least 20 pages, around the 20 to 30 range, just as we had been doing with Quantum. Okay. Time to jump in. The Emperor of all maladies. I have this weird angle because I'm currently charging my phone simultaneously. You can probably see the wire. It's going here and then, plugged in there, right? So, yeah, this is a good view. Look at this. It's like a line going like that. Okay, I'll stop delaying. Let's actually read. Prologue. Diseases desperate grown by desperate appliances are relieved, or not at all. That's by William Shakespeare, Hamlet. That's the opening quotes. These are not actually part of the main body of the text, so to speak. Cancer begins and ends with people. In the midst of scientific abstraction, it is sometimes possible to forget this one basic fact. Doctors treat diseases, but they also treat people, and this precondition of their professional existence sometimes pulls them in two directions at once. And that's by June Goodfield. That's another quote. Very interesting. Pulling them in two directions at once. On the morning of May 19th, 2004, Carla Reed, a 30-year-old kindergarten teacher from Ipswich, Massachusetts, a mother of 3 young children, woke up in bed with a headache. Not just any headache, she would recall later, but a sort of numbness in my head. The kind of numbness that instantly tells you that something is terribly wrong. Something had been terribly wrong for nearly a month. Late in April, Carla had discovered a few bruises on her back. They had suddenly appeared one morning, like strange stigmata, then grown and vanished over the next month, leaving large map-shaped marks on her back. Almost indiscernibly, her gums had begun to turn white. By early May, Carla, a vivacious, energetic woman accustomed to spending hours in the classroom chasing down 5- and 6-year-olds, could barely walk up a flight of stairs. Some mornings, exhausted and unable to stand up, she crawled down the hallways of her house on all fours to get from one room to another. She slept fitfully for 12 to 14 hours per day, and woke up feeling so overwhelmingly tired that she needed to haul herself back to the couch again to sleep. Carla and her husband, give me a second. These contact lenses are bugging me today. Carla and her husband saw a general physician and a nurse twice during these 4 weeks, but she returned each time with no tests and without a diagnosis. Ghostly pains appeared and disappeared in her bones. The doctor fumbled about for some explanation. Perhaps it was a migraine, she suggested, and asked Carla to try some aspirin. The aspirin simply worsened the bleeding in Carla's white gums. Outgoing, gregarious, and ebullient. Interesting. Carla was more puzzled than worried about her waxing and waning illness. She had never been seriously ill in her life. The hospital was an abstract place for her. She had never met or consulted a medical specialist, let alone an oncologist. She imagined and concocted various causes to explain her symptoms: overwork, depression, dyspepsia, neurosis, or insomnia. But in the end, something visceral arose inside her, a seventh sense that told Carla something acute and catastrophic was brewing within her body. On the afternoon of May 19th, Carla dropped her 3 children with a neighbor and drove herself back to the clinic, demanding to have some blood tests. Her doctor ordered a routine test to check her blood counts. As the technician drew a tube of blood from her vein, he looked closely at the blood's color, obviously intrigued. Watery, pale, and dilute, the liquid that welled out of Carla's veins hardly resembled blood. Carla waited the rest of the day without any news. At a fish market the next morning, she received a call. "We need to draw some blood again," the nurse from the clinic said. "When should I come?" Carla asked, planning her hectic day. She remembers looking up at the clock at the wall. A half-pound steak of salmon was warming up in her shopping basket, threatening to spoil if she left it out too long. In the end, commonplace particulars make up Carla's memories of illness: the clock, the carpool, the children, a tube of pale blood, a missed shower, the fish in the sun, the tightening tone of a voice on the phone. Carla cannot recall much of what the nurse said, only a general sense of urgency. "Come now," she thinks the nurse said. "Come now." And there's a little squiggle, and that represents a break here in the world of Emperor of All Maladies. Look at this little squiggle here. That's cool. And you can tell there's another uh-huh. My God. There's already fucking white blood here. And we're on the second page. This might be fucked for me. Oh dear. Even the... man. I heard about Carla's case at 7 o'clock on the morning of May 21st, on a train speeding between Kendall Square and Charles Street in Boston. The sentence that flickered on my beeper had the staccato and deadpan force of a true medical emergency. Carla Reed, new patient with leukemia, 14th floor. Please see as soon as you arrive. As the train shot out of a long dark tunnel, the glass towers of the Manhattan General Hospital suddenly loomed into view, and I could see the windows of the 14th floor rooms. Carla, I guessed, was sitting in one of these rooms by herself, terrifyingly alone. Outside of the room, a buzz of frantic activity had probably begun. Tubes of blood were shuttling between the ward and the laboratories on the second floor. Nurses were moving about with specimens. Interns collecting data for morning reports. Alarms beeping. Pages being sent out. Somewhere in the depths of the hospital, a microscope was flickering on, with the cells of Carla's blood coming into focus under its lens. I can feel relatively certain about all this because the arrival of a patient with acute leukemia still sends a shiver down the hospital's spine, all the way from the cancer wards on its upper floors to the clinical laboratories buried deep in the basement. Leukemia is cancer of the white blood cells, cancer in one of its most explosive, violent incarnations. As one nurse on the wards often liked to remind her patients, with this disease, even a paper cut is an emergency. For an oncologist in training, too, leukemia represents a special incarnation of cancer. Its pace, its acuity, its breathtaking, exonerable arc of growth forces rapid, almost often drastic decisions. It is terrifying to experience, terrifying to observe, and terrifying to treat. The body invaded by leukemia is pushed to its brittle physiological limit. Every system, heart, lung, blood, working at the knife edge of its performance. The nurses filled me in on the gaps of the story. Blood tests performed by Carla's doctor had revealed that her red cell count was critically low, less than a third of normal. Instead of normal white cells, her blood was packed with millions of large malignant white cells, blasts in the vocabulary of cancer. Her doctor having finally stumbled upon the real diagnosis, had sent her to the Massachusetts General Hospital. And there's another break. Fucking In the long, bare hall outside Carla's room, in the antiseptic gleam of the floor just mopped with diluted bleach, I ran through the list of tests that would be needed on her blood and mentally rehearsed the conversation I would have with her. I noted ruefully, something rehearsed and robotic, even about my sympathy. This was the 10th month of my fellowship in oncology, a 2-year immersive medical program to train cancer specialists, and I felt as if I had gravitated to my lowest point. In those 10 indescribably poignant and difficult months, dozens of patients in my care had died. I felt I was slowly becoming inured to the deaths and desolation, vaccinated against the constant emotional brunt. There were 7 such cancer fellows at this hospital. On paper, it seemed like a formidable force. Graduates of 5 medical schools and 4 teaching hospitals, 66 years of medical and scientific training, and 12 postgraduate degrees among us. But none of these years or degrees could possibly have prepared us for this training program. Medical school, internship, and residency had been physically and emotionally grueling. But the first 10 months of the fellowship flicked away those memories, as if all of that had been child's play, the kindergarten of medical training. Cancer was an all-consuming presence in our lives. It invaded our imaginations. It occupied our memories. It infiltrated every conversation, every thought. And if we, as physicians, found ourselves immersed in cancer, then our patients found their lives virtually obliterated by the disease. In Alexander Solzhenitsyn's novel Cancer Ward, Pavel Nikolaevich Rusanov, a youthful Russian in his mid-40s, discovers that he has a tumor in his neck, and is immediately whisked away into a cancer ward in some nameless hospital in the frigid north. The diagnosis of cancer, not the disease, but the mere stigma of its presence, becomes a death sentence for Rusanov. The illness strips him of his identity. It dresses him in a patient's smock, a tragicomically cruel costume, no less blighting than a prisoner's jumpsuit, and assumes absolute control of his actions. To be diagnosed with cancer, Rusanov discovers, is to end a borderless medical gulag, a state even more invasive and paralyzing than the one he has left behind. Solzhenitsyn may have intended his absurdly totalitarian cancer hospital to parallel the absurdly totalitarian state outside it. Yet when I once asked a woman with invasive cervical cancer about the parallel, she said sardonically, "Unfortunately, I did not need any metaphors to read the book. The cancer ward was my confining state, my prison." As the doctor learning to tend cancer patients, I had only a partial glimpse of this confinement, but even skirting its periphery, I could still feel its power, the dense, insistent gravitational tug that pulls everything and everyone into the orbit of cancer. A colleague, freshly out of his fellowship, pulled me aside in my first week to offer some advice. "It's called an immersive training program," he said, lowering his voice. "But by immersive, they really mean drowning. Don't let it work its way into everything you do. Have a life outside the hospital. You'll need it, or you'll get swallowed." But it was impossible not to be swallowed. In the parking lot of the hospital, a chilly concrete box lit by neon floodlights, I spent the end of every evening after rounds in stunned incoherence, the car radio crackling vacantly in the background, as I compulsively tried to reconstruct the events of the day. The stories of my patients consumed me, and the decisions that I made haunted me. Was it worthwhile continuing yet another round of chemotherapy on a 66-year-old pharmacist with lung cancer who had failed all other drugs? Was it better to try a tested and potent combination of drugs on a 26-year-old woman with Hodgkin's disease and risk losing her fertility, or to choose a more experimental combination that might spare it? Should a Spanish-speaking mother of 3 with colon cancer be enrolled in a new clinical trial when she can barely read the formal and inscrutable language of the consent forms? Immersed in the day-to-day management of cancer, I could only see the lives and fates of my patients played out in color-saturated detail, like a television with the contrast turned too high. I could not pan back from the screen. I knew instinctively that these experiences were part of a much larger battle against cancer, but its contours lay far outside my reach. I had a novice's hunger for history, but also a novice's inability to envision it. And that's our third break. I mean, the subject matter really puts a bit of course, there's dread. You know, with an introduction like this, you don't know what's coming. It could be the worst thing, not the worst thing like literature-wise, but the worst thing like you could think of. It could be your worst nightmare that could come up, and you would be like, yeah, that tracks. And I feel that weight of expectations might be making me drag my feet a bit and making this feel a bit strained than usual. Like, I feel like I've already read like 10 pages, not 10 pages. Yeah. But I've barely read 5. But my mind is so worn out by just these 5 pages that it feels that I've read 15 or maybe 20. Alright. Stop trying to make yourself look pitiful. Stop trying to make yourself look pitiful. I'm talking about me as a reader, not to the author, because honestly, it does feel like I'm kind of toiling my feet a bit, but at the same time, it is something that we need to know about cancer and all that. So I feel it's a necessary truth, some hard medicine to swallow in the language of, health and whatnot. Alright, let's do this. But as I emerged from the strange desolation of those 2 fellowship years, the questions about the larger story of cancer emerged with urgency. How old is cancer? What are the roots of our battle against this disease? Or, as patients often ask me, where are we in the war against cancer? How did we get here? Is there an end? Can this war ever be won? This book grew out of the attempt to answer these questions. I delved into the history of cancer to give shape to the shape-shifting illness that I was confronting. I used the past to explain the present, the isolation and rage of a 36-year-old woman with stage 3 breast cancer. Did I skip a page? I think this is a brief summary of what the book has. Okay. The isolation and rage of a 36-year-old woman with stage 3 breast cancer had ancient echoes in Atossa, the Persian queen who swallowed her diseased breast in cloth to hide it, and then, in a fit of nihilistic and prescient fury, possibly had a slave cut it off with a knife. A patient's desire to amputate her stomach ridden with cancer, sparing nothing, as she put it to me, carried the memory of the perfection obsessed 19th century surgeon William Halsted, who had chiseled away at cancer with larger and more disfiguring surgeries, all in the hopes that cutting more would mean curing more. Ah, crap. Now I know what's gonna come up, and I don't quite like that. Roiling underneath these medical, cultural, and metaphorical interceptions of cancer over the centuries was the biological understanding of the illness, an understanding that had morphed, often radically, from decade to decade. Cancer, as we now know, is a disease caused by the uncontrolled growth of a single cell. This growth is unleashed by mutations, changes in DNA that specifically affect genes that incite unlimited cell growth. In a normal cell, powerful genetic circuits regulate cell division and cell death. In a cancer cell, these circuits have been broken, unleashing a cell that cannot stop growing. That this seemingly simple mechanism, cell growth without barriers, can lie at the heart of this grotesque and multifaceted illness is a testament to the unfathomable power of cell growth. Cell division allows us as organisms to grow, to adapt, to recover, to repair, to live. And distorted and unleashed, it allows cancer cells to grow, to flourish, to adapt, to recover, and to repair, to live at the cost of our living. Cancer cells can grow faster, adapt better. They are more perfect versions of ourselves. The secret to battling cancer, then, is to find means to prevent the mutations from occurring in susceptible cells, or to find means to eliminate the mutated cells without compromising normal growth. The conciseness of that statement belies the enormity of the task. Malignant growth and normal growth are so genetically intertwined that braiding the two might be one of the most significant scientific challenges faced by our species. Cancer is built into our genomes. The genes that unmoor normal cell division are not foreign to our bodies, but rather mutated, distorted versions of the very genes that perform vital cellular functions. And cancer is imprinted in our society. As we extend our lifespan as a species, we inevitably unleash malignant growth, where mutations in cancer genes accumulate with aging. Cancer is thus intrinsically related to age. If we seek immortality, then so too, in a rather perverse sense, does the cancer cell. Oh, that's the end of the sentence. If we seek immortality, then so too, in a rather perverse sense, does the cancer cell. I'm not done yet. I'm just fixing my contact lenses. How precisely a future generation might learn to separate the intertwined strands of our normal growth from malignant growth remains a mystery. The universe, the 20th century biologist J.B.S. Haldane liked to say, is not only queerer than we suppose, but queerer than we can suppose. And so is the trajectory of science. But this much is certain. The story, however it plays out, will contain indelible kernels of the past. It will be a story of inventiveness, resilience, and perseverance against what one writer called the most relentless and insidious enemy among human diseases. But it will also be a story of hubris, arrogance, paternalism, misperception, false hope, and hype, all leveraged against an illness that was just 3 decades ago widely touted as being curable within a few years. Wow, curable within a few years, and that's 3 decades ago? Wow, we were Hubrick. Interesting. Hubrick. Why isn't that a word? Hubrick. To be Hubrick is to be full of hubris, you know? In the bare hospital room, ventilated by sterilized air, Carla was fighting her own war on cancer. When I arrived, she was sitting with peculiar calm on her bed, a schoolteacher jotting notes. But what notes, she would later recall. I just wrote and rewrote the same thoughts. Her mother, red-eyed and tearful, just off an overnight flight, burst into the room and sat silently in a chair by the window, rocking forcefully. The din of bacteria, I mean, the din of activity around Carla had become almost a blur. Nurses shuttling fluids in and out, interns donning masks and gowns, antibiotics being hung on IV poles to be dripped into her veins. I explained the situation as best I could. Her day ahead would be full of tests, a hurdle from one lab to another. I would draw a bone marrow sample. More tests would be run by pathologists. But the preliminary tests suggested that Carla had acute lymphoblastic leukemia. It is one of the most common forms of cancer in children, but rare in adults. And it is, I paused here for emphasis, lifting my eyes up, often curable. Curable. Carla nodded at that word, her eyes sharpening. Inevitable questions hung in the room. How curable? What were the chances that she would survive? How long would the treatment take? I laid out the odds. Once the diagnosis had been confirmed, chemotherapy would begin immediately and last more than 1 year. Her chances of being cured were about 30%, a little less than 1 in 3. Dang. We spoke for an hour, perhaps longer. It was now 9:30 in the morning. The city below us had stirred fully awake. The door shut behind me as I left, and the whoosh of air blew me outwards and sealed Carla in. And that is the end of the prologue, and oh my god, it's already 30 minutes. And that was what? That was fucking 10 pages. That whole thing was 10 pages, and I spent 30 minutes on it. I mean, that's... Oh, this whole thing is 500. Cool. A sizable challenge. I will have fun battling it as we battle cancer. What a motivational thing to say. How poignant. Anyways, I should probably get to sleeping. It's probably already 12:30 by now in the night, and I should go to sleep. Alright, see ya.